Welcome to Built to Win, the podcast created to help you level up your business game by developing a success mindset made for the long run. In this episode, Intentionally Planning Your Life, Amber Olson Rourke is joined by her husband, Damon Rourke, as they share an intentional planning and prioritization process that they use to help define success in every area of life, set clear goals, and stay on track. Join them for a step-by-step lesson in how to plan for each area of your life, either alone or with your partner, and how it can change the way you move toward your future.
Hi, I'm Amber Olson Rourke, and we are excited to be back with you on the Built to Win podcast. And we're going to be talking about the work-life balance myth. So, is work-life balance a unicorn worth chasing? I'm not a huge fan of the actual term balance in this particular context because in my mind, it creates these buckets where each bucket has to be equally balanced. And I think that is probably unrealistic for most people. But you can have intentional priorities, and then you can prioritize your time against those priorities, and that leaves you feeling fulfilled. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. I believe that is absolutely possible for people to achieve with intentional planning. And I'm super excited to welcome a special guest to this podcast, which is my husband, Damon Rourke. Welcome, Damon.
Thank you, Amber. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast.
So Damon and I, we've known each other since high school. We did not date in high school. We were just good friends, ended up dating after college, and we have now 3 girls. And we just celebrated our 12-year anniversary a few days ago. So in addition to that, we also work together. So that can add an extra crinkle into any dynamic. And so we're going to be just sharing this kind of priority planning process we've been doing ourselves and refining over the last 5 years. This was really something that a process that Damon started a while back. And so I want to just really start with the why behind this planning process, why it was so important to you to start this conversation.
Yeah, and I think first of all, it's just a good idea. Like that's really what it came down to, is just a good idea. We've both had so many mentors and people that have been kind enough to pour into us that they recommend some type of annual plan. I think for me, growing up as an athlete, I was a swimmer I remember in high school somewhat, but especially definitely in college. It was you planned your entire year. You planned your entire training year so that you would peak at the end of the season, whether it was conference championships, whether it was NCAA championships, whether it was Olympic trials or whatever the meet was, you would plan that out. And then when I got into sales, we knew our sales schedule, we knew when the bonuses would kick in. And so it was very natural to plan. And then that's always the model that stood out to me my whole life, was a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And then we easily took that into our marriage. You're a great planner. I'd gotten very good at planning at that point. And so, just having a plan, having a clear communication around that plan made sense. We got married 6 months after the company launched, right? And when you launch a company together, it's very clear what the mission is, right? It is, we are here to grow this thing. And then we had our first daughter, and that was incredible. And that was definitely not easy, but it's something that we did without too many hiccups. And then we throw in the second kid. And I think that's when we just really started to feel life. I know as a
Second one always gets you.
The second one, I know as the husband and father, like it got to a point where it's like, we just need a plan. We need to make sure that we're on the same page. As our oldest was getting older, it was time to talk about school. It was time to talk about what's the next step. It was really, for me, it was just, it was, what's this life going to look like? What do we want this life to look like? How are we going to create this together? And so that's when we talked and decided to start doing these annual planning sessions.
Yeah. And I think, as like you mentioned, you kind of outgrow your natural day-to-day planning skill sets, and you need something that's more longer term. And then, when I think back to that time 5 years ago, there were so many demands on both of us. But for me, having 2 small kids, a really kind of high stress demanding job. We had deaths in the family. We had health issues in our extended family. And I just felt like overwhelmed in a sense. And I remember one night crying to you and just saying, like, I don't feel like I'm enough. I felt like I'm giving a little bit to everyone, but not enough to anyone. And that's just like a really hard feeling. And so, after consoling me, you asked me this really powerful question, which was, what would it look like to you to do enough? Like, what would it actually mean and look like to you to do enough? And in that moment, I realized I didn't actually know. Like, I was feeling that I didn't measure up to something that I hadn't even defined, which is wild, right? But I feel like a lot of people live in that space. Like, you feel like you're not measuring up to something that isn't even defined. And so I think that is really where I truly got behind this process 100%. And people say you can't have it all. And I like to think of it as you can have it all if you actually define what all means to you, which is not the same thing as everything, because you can't have everything. But I do think with an intentional prioritization and planning, you can have the all that is most important to you. So that was really what we wanted to get out of this process, is a shared definition of what was enough for each area of our life, like getting on the same page, and what were some of the big goals that we were going to sacrifice and chase after. What were some of the memories we wanted to make together? And I think the together part of this is really important. Now, if you're single, you can absolutely do this entire process, for yourself. But if you're in a partnership, you're married, you have someone that you're spending your life with, the together part is so important. And I've noticed that a lot of times the day-to-day friction in people's marriages or relationships is really because there are not clear expectations of each other or the family unit's priorities. So this ends up getting worked out or not worked out in a day-to-day stressed environment instead of with intention in a safe place. So, Damon, what is your thoughts on this concept from a male perspective?
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point too, is especially with couples or any interpersonal relationship, when it is that personal side, what you're fighting about is never what you're fighting about.
Yes,
Right?
always.
It's never what you're fighting about, but it is those unmet expectations. I know for me personally, it's I want to do something when I get something in my head, like that's what I want to do. And sometimes I think I communicate what I want to do and what my plan is and what those sacrifices are going to be and what that's going to look like. And as you more than anybody else in the world know, I don't always effectively communicate what the actual plan is. And that's what it comes down to. It's thinking about what you want and then what it's actually going to take to get there. And so, and that's just natural. And I think, like you said, you kind of outgrow what you're used to. You outgrow what used to work doesn't necessarily work anymore because when, and I talk about this a lot, but when you get to college and you look back at high school and you're like, what did I do with all the time I had in high school? And then you're in college, you're like, I'm so busy. And then you're out of college and you're working. You're like, what did I do with all that extra time?
Yes.
And then you're just working. You're done with college, you're just working. You're like, oh my gosh, like I had so much time. What did I actually do with it? And then you get married, and now you have two schedules, and your time is cut in half. And then you throw a kid and two and three kids in the mix. But we never outgrow what maybe we established in high school, college, or
Right.
as
Our
a single
habits
adult.
don't evolve.
Yeah, yeah. And then as a, maybe even you had habits as a married couple, and they just at some point you have to decide what your priorities are, and going hard in every direction just does not work.
Right. Funny story. This was not on my list of things to talk about, but Damon's communication. One of our biggest fights early on in our marriage. So this is like the level of communication. Like there's a car commercial. He sees the car. He's like, "Oh, that's a really nice car. I'd like to have that car." And I'm like, "Yeah, babe, that sounds like a great idea." Then I'm like out of town, and he buys the car, and he's like, "What? I said I wanted that car." That does not mean we're on the same page about buying a new car. Anyway,
I was driving.
um, yeah. So it's important to do this planning process with everyone involved. We even involve our kids in the process. Like once we determine our priorities for the year, we bring it to them. We talk about it so that they understand, like if there's sacrifices, we're going to be out of town for something, they know the why behind it. They know what we're trying to achieve as a family, and they can put down some of their own goals into the mix as well. So we're going to dive into the actual process we use. We've done this every year for 5 years. And we do it over a 3-day period. Now, you don't have to do it over 3 days. You could do it all in one day in 3 specific phases, or you could do it over 3 nights. But I do think it's important to have 3 distinct phases of it. And it's interesting, this last time we were at Four Seasons in Santa Fe when we did this process, and a lot of people just happened to ask us what we were doing there. And when we told them, everyone was like, oh my gosh, I need that. Will you send that information to me? Oh my gosh, I need that information. Send that to me. And so it really struck a chord with us, like that, this is something that people actually need and would bring value for them. So we're here today to share that. So an important piece is to do this process when you have limited distractions. Okay, that's a huge part of it. If you're having a million different demands, your phone's going off, you're having to change your baby's diaper or whatever, you're just not going to be able to get in the right space. So you want to do it where you have limited distractions. You don't have to do anything fancy, but you have to be super intentional to make that space and time to really focus on the conversations and the process. So phase 1 is all about reflection. We're going to dive into each of these. Phase 2 is all about planning. Phase 3 is all about celebration. So reflection, planning, celebration has a real natural harmony to it. When we first started, we just did planning, and then we added in these other dynamics. And Damon, if you can just share your perspective on kind of how adding in the other parts of it changed the dynamic of the process.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the planning it out also, or at least getting the ball rolling. One of the reasons that for me that I felt very called to do this for our family was I was listening to a pastor, and he gave a sermon, and his point was that a lot of problems in the world could be fixed by fathers being fathers and husbands being husbands. And I really, as a father, as a husband, everybody's going to have their different point of view on this. But as a father and as a husband, and in fact, I very much believe in personal responsibility, and I know you do too, Amber. That what's the Gandhi quote?
I don't know. I think he has a lot.
Be the change.
I'll be the change you want to wish to see in the world.
The thing that's on the coffee cup that is out on the counter.
I do have that coffee cup.
Yeah. But they, guys, this is, I believe in that. So I really felt like that's why I wanted to organize this and kind of lead our family into that. But then when I've been talking to different people about it over the last 5 years, and Amber's a very strong leader. She's got a very strong personality. And it's not that when I say leadership, or say if you're a husband or a father or a wife or a mom and you're the one leading your family in this, it's not this authoritative, like do what I say or else leadership style or leadership position. It's really just get it started, because when we started, it was planning. I was very much into planning, still very much into planning, but I wanted to have this plan, and then also open it up. I believe one of my roles is just to help Amber and our daughters be the best version of themselves. And so to plan this out and to put Amber in this position, that's when she added in the reflection and the celebration side that really make a huge difference, really make it that holistic experience, rather than this is the plan. It really makes it more of a personal, this is first I love you, and this is the family that we're creating together, rather than here's our goals, here's the KPIs, here's the vacations, let's go.
Yeah. Yes. So I love starting with a reflection. And this is a format that I really had used like in business. And I think I'd been taught it in some of the executive courses that I had done. But it's this format of keep, leave, and add. So you're thinking about in each area of your life. So I'm going to give you the areas that we do. You can make these your own. But what we cover each year is health, personal growth, career, marriage, friendships, kids, spiritual, and finances. So those are the categories that we want to focus on. And so in each of these categories, we think about what is something in that category that I want to make sure that I keep doing. And that's really important, because a lot of times there's things that are working for us so well that we forget that we need to keep doing them. So it's like, this is something that's really helpful to me in this area that I want to make sure I keep. And then leave behind. What in these areas, what in my health would it serve me to leave behind? What in my finances would it serve me to leave behind, right? It might be like, I'll give you one of ours was we like going on vacations, but don't like planning vacations. So we were booking things last minute. And so I was like, I would like to leave behind booking vacations last minute and paying more for them than, you need to. So that's just one example. And then add is what is something, one or two things. You don't want to create a list of like a million things because then you'll be overwhelmed. Something that you want to add to this area of your category. So we do these separately. I highly encourage you to do them separately if you're doing it with somebody else, because you want to have your own answers. And then we share them, we talk about them. And we take literally hours on that first day talking through each of these things, because you don't want to just have a surface level answer. You want to really understand the why, what your partner or what you're really meaning behind what you're saying in each of these. And it creates all of this beautiful conversation that I don't think just happens again in the everyday kind of rat race of, get the kids to school, go to work, do this, do that, go, all of the different things. I'll give you one example is for both of us in our marriage category, we had, in the add category that we wanted to add doing more fun activities together. We go on date nights, but we usually just go to dinner. So we wanted to do more kind of activity-based stuff. And then in the health department, we both independently put we wanted to do more stretching, more yoga type workouts. And so it gave us a great idea to create a weekly date night Mondays after the kids go to bed, where we can do a yoga date night together and just like do yoga together in our little workout room. But like that conversation would literally have never happened had we not had this conversation. Now, we have these categories, right? Health, personal growth, career and marriage, friendships, kids, spiritual, finances. And like you mentioned, Damon, it's hard to be like going for a 10 out of 10 of each category. So I know for you, ranking these in order is really important and plays a role in how you approach them. Why does that matter for you, kind of putting these in the right order?
Yeah, and I think first of all, you want to, just like you said, you want to do the categories that matter to you. So if you don't resonate with one, don't plan it. You can always add it back. You can always add it in later, but don't feel like you have to do that. But I think it's important that you know your own personal priorities. I was probably told way too much as a teenager and in my early 20s that I just didn't have my priorities in order, and that was just a saying to me. But I think now it just makes so much sense. And so when I'm looking at my priorities, it's where do I want to spend my time? Where do I want to spend my energy? That's all you have, and we don't know how
Yeah.
much we have left of it. And so you want to make sure you're spending your time and your energy where you want to spend your time and your energy, what's important to you. And so, just for example, for me personally, mine is my faith, my health, my wife, my kids, my business, my family, my friends, and then any activities after that. Like I do jujitsu, would love to get into golf someday when we have, um,
Less small kids.
yeah, older kids. But that's for me, and the way that I've come to those, and that probably took me 3 years to get my priorities to a place where it resonated with me. It doesn't have to resonate with you. They're not your priorities. You can put your priorities together, but I think it's important that we acknowledge that because it helps me make decisions. Where am I going to spend my time? Where am I going to spend my energy? My faith, for example. If my faith is off, my relationship with everything just feels off. Next is my health. And I used to, for a long time, it went faith and then it went amber. And so for a long time, that's what it was. But I recognize that if I'm not putting a focus on my mental health, on my spiritual health, on my physical health, that I don't show up for amber like I want to show up. So it's important for me that I have that as a priority, that I acknowledge that as a priority, because then it gets into, I'm there to serve amber. I'm there to serve our kids. I want a good marriage. I want a good relationship with my kids. I want those to thrive, but my faith and my health have to be in order for me to do that to the full extent that I want to do that. And then it goes to business. My business allows me to hang out and spend a lot of time with my family, allows me to spend time on my health, allows me to spend time on my faith. And then it goes family. So outside of our kids, outside of Amber, family will come after business. And the way I got to that, and that might sound kind of harsh, but if there's a conference that I have to go to, that's necessary that I go to, and it's during one of our kids' birthdays, if it's during Amber's birthday or something that's very big or very important to Amber, I will find a way to make it home from that conference. I'll make the conference a priority, but the birthday will come before. However, if it's my cousin's birthday and I'm at a conference, conference, they're getting a happy birthday phone call. They're getting the text message. They're getting the post on social media. They're not getting me leaving this conference because that conference is there to help serve my business. So I just think having those in order is so important. Keep in mind, guys, all this stuff you can change. I think that's one of the key takeaways on my part of this. You can change this stuff at any time. This is your planning, but it's important that you do take steps in the right direction.
So after the reflection period, it like we spend a whole day. Like I said, it could just be you spend the morning and then you make a conscious transition at lunch to move on to phase 2, or you do this across multiple days. But phase 2 is planning. And I'll tell you that, like Damon mentioned, doing the reflection part creates so much conversation and clarity that it makes the planning so much easier. We used to just jump into the planning, and I felt like I would just end up writing stuff down that I didn't really mean, but I wanted to like check a box. I'm like, I should like to want to work out more. So I'm going to put that down. I don't actually want to work out more. I want to keep working out the 3 times I'm doing because that is enough for me. So, it gets you kind of just more in tune with yourself. So you're not just writing down things that you feel like you should. You should
Sound good.
actually, yeah, that sound good, because then you're not actually going to do it. You're not going to stick with it because you never wanted to do it in the first place. Um, so planning, we start with a motto for the year. And it really helps set the tone for our decisions. Anytime we're kind of stuck between like, what should we do, this or that, we go back to that motto of the year. Okay, which decision aligns best with the motto for the year? And we change that year to year. And this is kind of the umbrella for the rest of the planning. Then we make specific goals for each category, the categories that we just went over. Again, you can make these categories your own, but you want something specific for each category. And this is where you get to determine what is enough, right? Like it's enough for me to keep doing my 3 workouts a week. And what areas are you in growth mode? Like for us, both in our business, this year was like an all-out growth mode year. You can't try to be a 10 out of 10 in each category, or you're absolutely burnt out and you'll feel like you're not enough, right? So other examples of what is enough. I make it a goal to make 1 new friend every year. And at first, Damon was like, that's a ridiculous goal. Like, why even write it down? I'm like, no, it's a great goal because then I can intentionally spend time. Like, I don't have a ton of time. So I want to keep my close friends that I have, keep those. And I just want to add 1 new friend a year. And that means my yeses are going to be aligned to spending time with that relationship, developing that friendship. My nos are going to be to, other things, maybe things I'm invited to that aren't aligned with that. Now I make a whole lot of other like, acquaintances and relationships. I'm talking about like a true friend. So enough for me is 1 new one a year versus like this year, like I mentioned, we had aggressive business goals. Like one of mine was to launch a podcast that became a top 1% podcast. So thank you to all of our listeners because we have achieved that. So that's super exciting. Another tip I have in how to set those goals is we make a lot of the goals activity based because again, you want to have something that is non-subjective. You don't want to leave it to your judgment if you're doing good enough or not. So this would be something that's more subjective. I want to be a more present parent. That is way too vague. And you're going to have to apply your judgment to if you're doing it enough. And that's going to likely make you feel like you're not enough versus that might be the umbrella that we're thinking about. Like, how do we be more present parents? But it breaks down into activities like, we're going to take each kid on a one-on-one date each quarter. We're going to pray with the kids each night. We're going to set a no phone time certain days of the week. We're going to have Sunday family dinners every Sunday, right? They're very measurable. Are we doing these things or not? And then we don't have to apply, the judgment game or are we being more present or are we not? I think that really helps to remove some of that feeling of like, I'm just not doing enough. Now, one of the most important parts of this planning process, if you're doing it with a partner, I think we really dove into a lot more this year. Damon is really discussing what that looks like. So what are your tips on kind of taking that next step and understanding the impact of doing all of these things that you've now put to paper?
Yeah, and I think with the planning, when you are looking at planning, it is, especially if you're first getting started, it's really easy to overplan. It's really easy to overcommit. And you're right, Amber. One of the things that we added in this year was, of course, what does success look like? But what does sacrifice look like? And what does support look like? Like, how can I support you towards these goals? What's the sacrifice actually going to look like? Um, and it leads to these second and third level questions of, well, why is that important to you? This is my goal. Well, why? Why is this important to you? Why is this important to you? What does that look like for our family? Because when we're on the same page that of what we want our family to look like, and I don't think you're not going to find anybody who says, that has kids and that says, my business will always come before my kids. Like, what I want to do is work, not have a relationship with my kids. And then when they're 15 years old, look at them as like they're strangers and they look at me like a stranger. Nobody's ever going to say that, but it just happens because we don't plan for it. And I think
Right.
when spouses, when parents get on the same page, that's where it becomes very, 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 very powerful. But you want to know what that sacrifice looks like. And again, and that support about like how much time it's going to take. Is it even, with where we're at in our lives, is it realistic? And I'm totally a believer in having huge goals, but if it's a goal that with your time and energy that you have, maybe it's a goal that's going to take you 2 years to get to where you want to be rather than the next year. Tony Robbins has a great quote that we highly overestimate what we can get done in a day and highly underestimate what we can get done in a year, which is that slide edge approach, which if you guys have been listening to the podcast for a little while, you heard Jeff Olson, the author, on here talking about the slide edge. And so if you haven't heard that, go back. I think it's episode 2 or 3, but you can go back and find that. Applying the slide edge to your goals, applying the slide edge to what you can get done over the year, but breaking it down even into a weekly basis. One of Amber's big goals was, or one of her health goals, I wouldn't say big goals, one of her health goals was drinking lemon water every day. And so when we really look at, when you look at how can I support her do that, I'm a morning person. I wake up in the morning, I'm excited to be awake. I'm ready to go. Amber's excited about an hour or two after she's awake. It's just a slower process, which, to be honest, I always thought was a decision. I thought it was a choice. You can be a morning person, you can be a daytime person, you can be a nighttime person. Just make up your mind and get excited. That is not true. Our middle daughter is just like Amber. Like, they wake up in the morning and they have the same look on their face. You ask them, like, they wake
Ready
up
to not talk to anyone ever for at
right.
least an hour.
Amber wakes up and I'm like a Labrador, just waiting by the bedside, just waiting
Too
to
much.
talk and ready to get after it with her. And our middle daughter's the same way. And it's really interesting to me, but it gave me more empathy for what she's going through. And so when we were talking about the support side, when we're going through her health goals, I'm like, you know what? I'm up at the gym. Generally I'm back before she's even awake. When I'm making my coffee, it's very easy to grab a lemon out of the fridge, slice it in half and make some lemon water and just have it there waiting for her when she's had her coffee. One, it makes me look like an awesome husband. Two, it's helping her in her goals, right? It's me supporting her in her goals. And guys, along with the lines of what Amber was saying, with just having general goals, like be a better parent, be healthier. If you find yourself in that trap, that's okay. When you're evaluating it, there's something you have to do, and you either give yourself a 0 or a 1, and that's it. If you give yourself a 1, that's a 1, right? That's a win. You did a good
Means you're
job.
making progress, right? You're not like totally at a standstill. You're like inching forward, but you're moving.
Exactly. We're looking for progress, not perfection. But it is very easy to underestimate everything that you do and give yourself a bad score, a bad evaluation. But that's the only way I think that's the only way I can think of that would actually work, is giving yourself a 0 or giving yourself a 1. And then when getting back to the sacrifices, when you're talking about it, is this a sacrifice that you're both willing to make towards this goal? Is it, and what are some workarounds? What are some different solutions? But again, it gets you asking those second and third level questions, having deeper discussions and really making the most of your time together, rather than everybody thinking that everybody's on the same page, and when it's just not reality.
Yeah, I think it's especially when it comes down to the time where sacrifices have to be made. If you haven't had those in-depth conversations, just assume because of like a casual 2-minute conversation that the other person is ready to make the sacrifice. That's where I think you start seeing some friction.
Just another example, as Amber's integral to our business. I, however, am not necessarily integral. Like I'm important on the sales and marketing side, but when you have kids, usually it's one parent or the other that really kind of takes over, being the first point of contact for the kids, right? If the school's calling somebody, they're calling me. Right. If somebody's taking somebody to practice, it's going to be me. And that's really important for us because I have my goals. I have the things that I want to go after. And it really just puts it into perspective for both of us, what's important. And then it also gives Amber the opportunity to step up and make that sacrifice to help out the entire family as well, which I think it's just easy to overlook. Usually it's role reversal. Usually it's the female that is in charge of the kids and the male is going after the running the business. But from my perspective, it's important for everybody to have goals every single year. It's important for you to think about what you want out of your life in this next year and what you want your family to look like, what you want your marriage to look like. And so that's where we see, or I personally see a lot of people making the mistake of thinking that their goals and their dreams and what they want to accomplish doesn't matter and really minimizing that. And so then it gets to a point of frustration. Then it gets to a point of, well, this is what I wanted. Like, well, you never told anybody what you wanted. So how's
Right.
anybody supposed to know and support you in doing that? Because generally, most of the time, your spouse or your partner, whoever you're doing this planning session with, wants the most for you. They want you to have the most out of your life. They want to help you do that. But if they don't know what that is, honestly, that's on you. That's not on them to read your mind.
So to round out this planning process, we set the motto, we set the specific goals for each of the year, and then we map out the major events over the next year. So like, do we want to take a trip, just, the two of us, a family trip, or are there, milestone birthdays? Are there, things that we want to do to make special memories? We put that in the calendar before things start populating into the calendar. Now, you don't have to do this like at the beginning of the year. That's just how we do it. You can start it today and you could look at the rest of the year and say, what do I want? I mean, it's crazy, right? We're already so far into the year, it went by so fast. What do I want to happen? What vacations do I want to take? What memories do I want to have for the rest of this year? And put it down in the calendar because life will fill your calendar. So it's about having those blocks of time kind of accounted for. And so we get all that sorted out, and that kind of rounds out the planning phase. So then we move into the last phase, which is celebration. I think as a society, we have such a what's next mindset. Like, I achieved it, what's next? I achieved it, what's next? I graduated high school, what's next? I graduated college, what's next? I got my first job, what's next? Like, we don't stop and celebrate what we've accomplished. So we added this part in this year, which is really having a day where we just wanted to look at what were our goals from last year and have gratitude and congratulate each other on the things that we did achieve. Pull up photos and look at some of our favorite trips, our favorite memories. Do something fun together that you normally wouldn't do. Again, you could do all of this by yourself. If you're single, you could go and look at favorite memories. You could do something fun with yourself, with friends. It's just really about celebrating those achievements. And Damon, what kind of love your, again, male perspective on why celebration is important in the process.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, my sister and I were both very good at swimming, but we didn't really celebrate too much. Like, it was just, celebration was a big thing. My family fell into that trap of just go for, like, just what's next? Like, what's next? What's next? Don't get too high on your horse. Don't get too cocky. Like, what's next? Let's make sure we're focused on the future. Let's make sure we're working towards that. But yeah, it allows you to acknowledge what you've accomplished over the last year. Again, most people can look back and they can point out the things that went wrong. They can point out the things that they could have done better. Very few of us sit down and actually acknowledge the wins that we had. And whether
Yeah.
you're single or married or divorced or whatever situation you're in, this is something you can do. And I think it's important that like Amber said, you can do it with friends or you can do it by yourself, but write it down and let yourself actually acknowledge what you accomplished over the year. Yes, a lot of people, there's people out there that didn't live through the year, right? You lived through the year. There's good things that you did through the year. There's reasons to be grateful that you're here another year later. And I think to let yourself be in a position where you can actually acknowledge them, where you can write them down, where you can celebrate those, it just adds a whole nother level of what I think ultimately is gratitude about moving forward into the next year. And it gives you, for us, it gives a lot of perspective on the goals also. So you might find yourself going through this celebration, going through this reflection and saying, oh, wow, like I actually did accomplish this. I can accomplish so much more this year. Or maybe I need to take a little bit of those goals and make it more of a 2-year goal and plan it out for a 2-year goal rather than a 1-year goal.
Yeah, I love that. And so what we found is that we would get through this whole amazing process and we'd have an epic plan, put it to paper, and then life. Life would happen. We would get back, things would be busy, and we weren't able to really keep it on track once we got back into the real world. So a couple things we've learned in that regard. First, definitely write it all down. You're not going to remember it all. You want to have this all like available to reference. You want to look at this often. Like this is now something you've put a lot of brain power and time into. You're going to want to look at this often. We also implemented this year a 30-minute weekly meeting with each other. Now, again, you could just do this with yourself. If if you're single, you can just do this by yourself. The intent is really the same. It's to look at the next week, look at your schedule, what you have coming up, and then to make progress on some of these things that you said were important, right? Like if you put on there that one of the things you wanted to add was going to a yoga class once a week, you could, in this 30-minute block, take a step forward to that. Look up what options you have in the area, sign up for a trial class. Your whole goal is to move the ball forward in some way in this 30 minutes. Now, you're going to be probably moving the ball forward in other ways, but this is just like an intentional check-in planning time. So we treat this like it's a very important meeting on our schedule because it is. We show up to it like it's just any other meeting. We review our upcoming schedule for the next 2 weeks. This really assures that everything is accounted for, who's taking which kid to what thing. Is someone having to travel? Is there an important meeting that we need to be, there to support each other for? Just really looking through that scheduling. But then we also make progress on certain priorities. Like if, for example, serves a couple of buckets because we don't want to be booking trips last minute for our financial goals and we want to actually go on some vacations. Like who's ever been like, oh, we should totally go on vacation this year together, and then the whole year goes by, it doesn't happen. Right? This is a way to make progress. So we said we want to take an anniversary trip in May. So in that 30-minute block, we'll start researching, pull it up on the computer, look at hotels together, book it right then. Right. And I think before we had a really inefficient process where emails would go back and forth and it just didn't work. And so this process of doing it, sitting there together, so that Damon doesn't buy another car by himself, we can all talk about what we are trying to make progress on and to do it in that block of time. And you can get so much more done than you think you can in that 30-minute block. I know for you, Damon, like you said, once you have an idea, you want to go for it. So how has this helped in your perspective of moving things forward?
Well, and first and foremost, having this planning session helps get us, when it helps us get us both on the same page, it allows me to know that there's going to be time allotted for us to move this forward so that whatever we're looking at, whatever we're talking about doing, whatever I'm excited about on a personal level between us, that this is when I know that we can move this forward rather than, we've planned vacation. Well, we've decided to go on vacations. And then I like planning. I like researching stuff and making sure that we're getting the best deal and the coolest spot and really looking at that. And I would spend hours looking at it before. It's just a waste of time. It would just be a complete waste of time because it was just me doing it. And it was almost just a way to procrastinate rather than, and kind of hide behind procrastinating rather than actually doing what I wanted to be doing or really deep down knew I needed to be doing. And so it limits that. It gives that allotted time so that that's when you're going to get it taken care of. And then just the emails back and forth. What would happen with Amber and I is I would send an email. She would either see the email or respond to the email later, or respond to the email, and then we'd see each other.
With follow-up questions.
Yeah. More follow-up questions. And I think it also, for both of us, just gives perspective on what the actual process is and what this process is going to look like. For example, we on our anniversary trip that we just took, we got together, we booked the hotel when we were together. Then Amber had second thoughts about the hotel, and my response is, you can go and change whatever you want to change, but this isn't a time that we're just going to make a suggestion and then I go research everything and then we decide just to keep it the way it is. And so it keeps that there. It gives it the amount of time that it needs. Honestly, it gives it the amount of time that planning needs to
And
stay
I
on the
think
same
again
page.
too, like it creates that safe space where again, we're not trying to have these conversations in the midst of, a toddler running around,
Yeah.
screaming, trying to reply to a work email where you're kind of half listening, half not. And the other person, your commentary might not be as well received. But like if you're walking in it to make progress on these things, like each person comes with that perspective.
hmm
I love your perspective. We've been talking about this recently on also just the ability, what taking action does. And if you don't take action, how that, it really starts to create almost backward momentum. And I'd love for you to just speak to that on kind of the power of taking action to make it something that isn't just, you know,
Yeah.
floating.
It was, I was listening to Ed Milet. He's a podcaster out there. He did a great episode on creative thinking and using your imagination. And so every day we have 60,000 thoughts. Okay. So you have 60,000 thoughts. It's like 85% of them are negative and 85% of them are repetitive. So every day of the 60,000 thoughts, 85% are negative and repetitive. And so how you break this cycle is you use your imagination. When you have divine wisdom coming through you, when you feel like maybe God's speaking to you, when you see signs or whatever it is, the energy, whatever you believe, your own intuition, um, that is creative, that is imaginative thinking, that's thinking about the future, that's thinking about changes that can be made based off your experience, based off your filter, based off everything that you've been through, that those are answers to the questions or the problems that you might be wrestling with at the time. And so when we look at that, he did this fantastic podcast. In my head, I kept thinking about action. I kept thinking he was going to say something about action. And so I think that's the part that's missing, is when you have these imaginative thoughts, when you have these forward moving thoughts, if you don't take action on them, well, the next day they become the past. They become what Ed Milet was talking about, was nostalgia. That when you're thinking about these repetitive thoughts, it's really nostalgia. It's thinking about the past. And so if you don't take action on these imaginative thoughts, on this intuition, then the next day it just becomes a part of the repetitive thoughts of that 60,000 thoughts. But if you take action on it, then you're going to have new thoughts. Like, what do we do next? What do we do next? What do we do next? And so I think one of the most important parts of this planning session is recognizing the plan needs to be good enough for you to get started. The plan needs to be good
Yeah.
enough for you to have a little bit of hope for the year, a little bit of vision for the year. Think about how you want to spend your time, because I guarantee anybody who sits down and lists out their time, nobody puts on the top of their priorities. Nobody puts, I want to watch more Netflix. I want to scroll on social media more. Nobody puts wasting time on there. Like, we know those are time wasters, but nobody puts it on there. And those things have their place, to veg out at the end of the day or whatever you want to do to recharge. But I think a lot of people spend way too much time on them, but it's because we don't have these priorities, because we don't recognize where we actually want to go. And so if we start becoming aware of what our imagination, where our imagination is taking us, where intuition is taking us, we start taking little pieces of action along a plan, then you're really going to start moving the ball forward a lot further and faster.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, just that the power in that action. So the last, kind of practical way that we use these priorities is in our day-to-day determination of what to say yes or no to. You cannot say yes to everything. You will be spread thin. You will end up, like Damon said, you'll end up overscheduling yourself. I truly believe we have an overscheduling pandemic in our country. Like everyone, our kids are overscheduled. Everyone is super overscheduled, and it doesn't allow you to be present in anything. You're just like racing to the next thing and then the next thing. So when I mean saying yes and no to things, I also mean saying no to really good things. But by saying no to those really good things that might not be as in alignment with your priorities as other things, it allows you to say yes to the most important things and to really say yes, not to just like check the box and show up, but to really be present and say yes. So, one practical example is with birthday parties. With three girls, they get invited to a ton of birthday parties. Like if we said yes to every single birthday party invitation, that's what we'd be doing all weekend long. So we're of course going to say yes to all of their best friends, right? We're gonna show up to all of their best friends' birthday parties, of course. But there's other friends that are just in their class, and I always ask them, like, is this a really great friend? How do you spend time with them, right? Ask them some questions. If it's someone that's not super important in their life and their birthday party is like during the only block the entire weekend that we have time to like just be a family, like sit down and play a game, go on a walk, did I say no? And I just simply say, I'm sorry, we can't attend. It doesn't work for our schedule. And I feel like a lot of people just say yes because there's not like something in their schedule and they feel like they need to be scheduled. And so by saying no, right, we don't go to that birthday party. My kids, never mind. We end up having this space for creating great memories together in that time. The art of saying no, I think is something people really have to work at because they feel so much guilt for saying no. But how you have to rephrase it in your mind is you're saying yes. Saying that no allows you to say yes to the most important things. It allows you to say your biggest and highest yes that's going to move you and your family towards those things that you say are most important. And I think that's been really powerful. And you're able to do that without guilt because you have this plan, right? You're not just going by your emotion feeling. You have this plan that you've put in place that you can now execute to. And that for me allows to remove, a lot of the mom guilt that people talk about is because of how intentional I am with my planning. I know where I'm supposed to be in that moment, and I try and show up fully to be who I need to be in that moment and not schedule myself. So Damon, what are your kind of closing thoughts or tips to people as they're, probably just getting started in this process and, just how to get started, how to have the right perspective as you go through this?
Yeah, like I said before, the plan has to be good enough for you to get started. The plan has to be good enough just to take that step forward. I would say for the planning process, if you're going to do some type of annual planning, and like Amber said, you can do this at any time. We're recording this in late April. If you want to get started with this in May or June or July, you can do this at any time and start thinking about the rest of the year, the rolling year. You can do July to June. It doesn't really matter, but the point is to get started. Spend a little bit of time thinking about what your annual planning time is going to look like, right? Spend time planning your time. Be intentional with this time. If you do block out, if you block out a couple nights in a row, and this might take an hour or two at night, you can do that over 3 nights. If you do it for 3 days, I would say respect any time that you do sacrifice towards planning. That really recognize that you're making that sacrifice, recognize that you're taking your time, you're taking your energy to do something that you believe is beneficial. And so turning your phone off is a great idea. Not having the TV on is a great idea. You can have some background music for sure. But kind of don't stress yourself out with putting all these rules on it, but do respect the sacrifice that you do make. And if you go on vacation for 2 or 3 days or a single day, whatever that looks like, really be intentional with that time. I think sometimes we go on vacation. I know sometimes I'll show up on vacation. I'm just stressed. All I want to do is have a drink and sit by the pool and just relax. That's not, for me, that's not going to put me in the best headspace all of the time. I want to come into that planning session really, really, really ready to go. And then I think finally, you're going to change, you're going to grow, and you're going to fail. You're going to set expectations of yourself. You're going to set plans. Life is going to happen. And so just take that in consideration. Just take that in consideration that you're going to change and you're going to grow. And that's part of the process, because that's why we're doing this. That's why we started doing this, was because we wanted to grow, and we wanted to grow together, and we wanted to have some idea of where we were going to. And then as you're planning, I know for some people, when Amber and I were, at one point, we were either trying to get pregnant or talking about having another kid. You don't know what the next year is going to look like when you're, especially in that pregnancy. I'm guessing Amber was just early on in the pregnancy, and you don't know what that pregnancy is going to look like. You don't know what that's going to end up like at that time. And then I've also talked to a few people recently that they're caring for a loved one. They're caring for a loved one that's sick, right? That might be heading towards dying, or you just don't know what the future is going to look like. It's easy to get wrapped up in that. It's easy to maybe if you're going through a rough patch in your marriage, if you're going through a rough patch, if you're not sure what the next year is going to look like, plan on what, from the position of what you want the year to look like. What do you want to happen with this year? I think that was some of the best advice I ever got with annual planning was, what do you want it to look like? And then plan that way. But yes, there's negative things that could happen. There's negative outcomes for no matter what season of life you're going through, but plan for what you want it to look like. And then you can adapt you're going through life over the year. You can always change your goals. These are written in pencil, not pen. They are your goals. You can make them bigger. You can make them smaller. You can adapt them based on what you want to do, but get started with some type of plan.
And I would just add to that, is to give yourself grace through the process. As you go through this, it's meant for progress, not perfection. And like Damon said, feel free to change. You might notice that there was something you wrote down that's a priority, and 6 months in, you haven't made any progress to that. And it's okay to ask yourself, is this truly a priority for me? Or did I just write this down to write it down? Or it sounded good? Or I wanted to, please somebody else? As a former people pleaser myself, that was something that I did. And so give yourself grace. Be honest with yourself, right? What you want is enough. Who you are is enough. You were made to be enough. And, start from that place of compassion with yourself. I just keep going. There's so much power in keeping going, no matter what it looks like, what progress you do or don't make, just keep going. That's where most people fail, is they let discouragement through the process keep them from the consistent forward motion. So, for us in our lives, our personal, professional lives, this tool has been really something that has allowed us to be built to win. We've gone through a lot of things together in our 12 years of marriage. As you guys know that have been listening to this podcast, some trials in our pretty significant trials in our business, which also impacts your family. And so we hope that you use these tools to help yourself be more built to win in whatever it is that you want to win in life. I know that this was a lot of kind of content to digest, so we will have some resource documents available for you on our Built to Win podcast Instagram. So find us on Instagram, Built to Win podcast, and we will have a link that gives you some of these tools in a way where you can kind of visually see it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and learning how you can be intentional with your priorities and have a fulfilled life.
That was Amber Olson Rourke and Damon Rourke talking about intentional planning and prioritization. If you'd like to learn more about this process, check out @Built2Win Podcast on Instagram for some free resources. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if this is your first episode of Built to Win, we invite you to go back and listen to our story from the beginning. You can find us wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And while you're getting to know us, be sure to leave us a rating and review to let us know what you think of the show.